Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podollan, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podollan, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome back or welcome to Up My Hockey. It's episode 14 and we are going to be chatting with Scott Nichol today. Scott Nichol is an ex-teammate of mine from the Detroit Vipers back in the 2000-2001 season, where I think we both agreed that we played on the worst professional sports hockey team ever assembled. We joke about that, but Scott is an awesome story. I call him the ultimate underdog. At 5'9", 180 pounds, he was an 11th round selection, 272 overall in 1993. He was the third last player picked in that draft. He went on to play almost 700 NHL games, and this is after being a 7-year minor leaguer. This is not a guy you would have thought to play 700 games, to retire from the NHL at 37. He is a testament of perseverance. He is a testament of patience and resiliency, and only having an A game he talks about. He's just an amazing story, a quality guy. He always was somebody that would bring a room together. He was one of those guys that was easy to be around, someone that you wanted to be around, and I think that also helped his career. Well, I know it helped his career. He is now the director of player development for the Nashville Predators. He's also the GM for their AHL affiliate in Milwaukee. He's still very much involved in the game and is now helping young guys become the players they want to be. So this is a really fun interview. We could have talked for another 2 hours, I'm sure. But without further ado, I bring you Mr. Scott Nichol. All right, welcome to Up My Hockey here, episode 14, and sitting in front of me is Mr. Scott Nichol. Thank you so much, Scotty, for joining. How you doing today, man?
Good. Everything's good. It's a beautiful day here in Nashville and just chilling at home, relaxing, doing some home projects.
Just like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Kind of crazy. As I was doing the research for this, it was funny to me because the year we played together marks 20 years ago. We were on the 2000-2001 Vipers, and my goodness, I want to get there because hockey's such an amazing thing. You played in a lot of teams yourself, as did I. One of the benefits of doing that is getting to meet a lot of people and getting to play with a lot of guys. And so part of this podcast and being able to even talk to you today is because of that connection, which is great. We picked up the phone. We had a little chat the other day for however many minutes it was, and it's like you kind of doesn't even feel like 20 years, does it?
No,
we
not at all.
Already.
It's
all right.
We're good. Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay, good. So just for people listening here, hopefully it doesn't cut out too much. But Nashville has the worst Wi-Fi in the U.S. It's noted for that. So if we have to go to a phone, we will here. But hopefully we make it through. So Scott, I'm gonna tell the underdog story here, and I don't know if you're gonna think that you were an underdog, but I want to get into that because here you are, 5'9", 180 pounds. Born December 31st, last day of the year, which is a disadvantage in almost anything, let alone in sports. And you end up making it to the WHL, first of all, as an undersized guy, end up doing real well there. You end up getting drafted in the 11th round, the third last pick in that draft, third last player picked in that draft, 272 overall, and you go on to play, 600 games or something, 600 games in the NHL. So it's like the ultimate underdog story. When I was looking at it, I'm like, that's just like, it's so inspiring and so cool in of itself. But did you ever look at yourself that way in that context?
No, I think it was just like a progression. Like I just wanted to be good at one level and then just keep going. Like all I was worried about is making the Flames AAA midget team and making that. And then the next year trying to make a team in the Alberta Junior League. And I got cut from there, went back to midget, played another year of midget with Calgary Flames. And then I broke my wrist at Christmas and the Calgary Royals had my rights. So they dropped me off. They let me go. And then I went to the Calgary Canucks with a broken wrist and played the rest of the season there, and that's kind of where the Portland Winterhawks saw me. And back then we didn't have the draft; we had a 50-man list, so they weren't sure if I was going to go to college or whatever. They took me for dinner and they put me on their list. And the next day or the next year, I was with the Winterhawks. Went there and tried out. Went to Kimberley, BC. That's where we had our training camp, and then signed my contract there for the Portland Winterhawks. And I was just happy to be, in the WHL. I struggled the first couple months, and then just kind of got some traction. And we had really good teams. Always play with you guys against Spokane and then Kamloops, and just kind of got better and better. And I was just always just so focused on, that year and just doing well. Like I didn't have an agent until I think when I thought maybe I might get drafted. I had to call somebody, say, hey, you want to represent me? Now kids got agents at 12, 13 years old. So it was different. And I think you can relate to, like, once you're in it, you're just in it. Until you actually retire and you take a step back, then you're like, oh yeah, no, that was kind of cool. Not many kids get to do that, or totally different path.
Sure. No, and everyone has a massively different path. And like you, with the birthday, I was having a hard time some of the years. Like, how old were you that first year in Portland?
So that would have been, I would have went in as an 18-year-old. So I would have been 17.
At the start of the season, you were 17, turned 18 before, so then that would have been technically your 18-year-old year then, right? Okay, so your 18-year-old year, which was your draft year. So you made the WHL on your draft year. How was that first camp? I mean, you already talked about it, that you made the team. Like, did you go in there, were you listed before you went to camp? Or did you go in there as an unlisted guy to camp?
I think they listed me, and then that's how I went to camp. When I was young at 16, I went to Moose Jaw's camp, and just to kind of get a taste of that. And then after that, I went back home, played midget hockey and all that. But then they listed me, and then that's when I went to the camp. And I still it wasn't like they were, hey, here's your contract, come to camp. It was like, I better go to camp and make this team, you know? And then the first 2 days, my mom and dad didn't come. I went there on my own and just tried out. And as soon as my mom and dad got there, they put us in a room and they wanted to sign me right away. So it was good.
That camp at all? Like, did you perform? Were you playing well? Were you nervous as hell? Like, were you fighting? Like, what was that camp about? Like, how did you feel you made that team?
Just buzzing around. I think I had lots of confidence, and, I played. Sometimes it's better to not just get rushed into it. So I played a ton for the Flames AAA, played a ton for Kerry Bracco and the Calgary Canucks down the stretch, and in the playoffs against, who would you play? I don't know, it will come to me, and then I don't know. Basically, in my whole career, my whole life, I've had always all the eggs in one basket. That's it. I didn't have anything anywhere else. So it was like, I remember driving to Kimberley in my Geo tracker and just worried about if I don't make this, where do I go from here? And like I said, all my eggs in one basket, and then just gave it. I thought, we had Johnny Baduke, Cale Hulse, Dave Kamek, like we had a great team, but big, like meaty. I was like just buzzed around, and I remember Johnny Baduke played against him, and then he was my line mate for the whole year. But I remember playing against him in the exhibition game or the inter squad game, and I was like, where's this guy from? Like, no teeth, big guy, just wants to fight everybody. But then it was just myself, Jason Weimer, and Johnny Baduke were aligned for the whole year, and he took good care of us. I could tell you that. So,
okay, well, Wayne was no slouch himself, and you guys had a tough team. I was going to talk about that. I mean, there was a lot of, like, even your skilled forwards were tough guys. Like you had a lot of toughness, a lot of big tough guys on the back end, and that was when the WHL was a tough league. Plain and simple. And did you? I mean, I was looking. You had 10, 11 seasons in a row where you had over 100 PIMs. I mean, you were definitely, I don't know what you would call probably an agitator now, maybe like a little bit of a pest. But you were definitely scrappy, though. But I don't remember you actually fighting that much. But you must have fought to get over 100 PIMs. You had to be fighting quite a bit, I assume, right?
Yeah, I fought quite a bit. sometimes bit off a little bit more than I can chew. I think just when I played, maybe my wick got smaller and smaller. Maybe that was to my advantage. Even just playing in the NHL, like I fought a lot of guys that have no business fighting. So I think I don't know. I think when you're surrounded by guys like that they make you play a little bit braver because they know they have your back, and then once I got a couple under my belt, I was like and I was like, seriously, I was 150 pounds when I went to WHL camp. So it wasn't like I'm going to be stringing guys out and technical fighter. It was like, all right, you hit me cheap, but the gloves are off. I'm chasing you down, and I'm just going to chuck them until something gives. And I think I learned my first lesson in Rochester. I was asking questions to fight this guy, and he just popped me. So I was like, from then on in, I'm just dropping them and start swinging. So things get a little hairy, I'll just fall down. So it wasn't too bad.
No, that's great. I mean, and like you said, Johnny Baduke, Jason Weimer, if anything goes sideways, someone on that team's going to have your tail, which is a nice feeling to have, and allows you to go be who you are, I guess, right? And be who you are. You were like, what a great rookie season. Almost a point a game. You had a point a game in the playoffs. I looked that up. You were like 16th in the league in points as a rookie, and what a welcome to the league. And by the sounds of it, you said you came in with confidence, so you must have had a good season in midget, and you just kind of rolled with it.
It's my first year in the WHL. I didn't really know what to expect, and I think that's the year we went to the finals. We lost to Swift Current. That's when they had the big trade for Dean McCammon out in Prince Albert, and we went to Game 7. I remember flying into Swift Current, and it was so windy. We got off we're in Portland, so we chartered a plane back then. It was a huge deal. So we chartered a plane to Swift, and we got off the walking off the airplane, and a guy grabbed my hat and threw it. It might have went 3 miles down the runway. It was so windy, but it was a good year. And then what did I put up? What did I have? 30 points, 31, 64 points, 31 goals. And it got me 11th round draft pick. Like that era, I was a small guy. No one's drafted small guys. Basically, the only reason why I got drafted is because our assistant coach, Brent Peterson, played for Buffalo, had a good relationship with those guys. And it was just me and the janitors, I think, left. I didn't even go to the draft. They called me, left a message. Buffalo didn't even call me. My assistant coach called me. He leaves a message on the answer machine. That's when we had answering machines back then. So I get home. I was in Banff rollerblading with a couple buddies. I get home. I was like, it was the draft. Like, I wasn't rated or ranked, or I just was like, another day. I was like, oh, it'd be cool if I got drafted. And then came home, my answering machine listens to the message, called Brent Peterson back. And I'm like, hey, Petey, what's going on? He's like, you got drafted. I'm like, oh, great. Who did I get drafted by? And he's like, you got drafted by Buffalo. And then a couple swear words. He's like, don't embarrass yourself, or don't make me look bad, or something like that, he said. And I was just like, don't worry, Petey, I won't. And then even then, so I got drafted. Then that next September, I get on a plane and I'm flying to Buffalo. I've never flown before. Like, it's so different back then. I was just a kid from Calgary, and they have one secretary from 9 to 5 in the office, no cell phone. So I get my ticket itinerary and all that kind of stuff, and I fly out of Calgary, go to, I think it was like Chicago, and I'm looking at Chicago, and I'm changing terminals and all this. I'm just like, where am I? Like, I've got my skates in my hand just in case my bag gets lost. I fly in. I think I get in at like 2 in the morning. We have testing the next morning at 6 in the morning. And, that just, it didn't matter. Like, now we got player development guys. We hold their hand all the way through. It was just like, here's your ticket. Be here. You got testing 6 a.m. at the Holiday Inn. And that was it. So.
No, 100%, man. I hear that. I want to rewind though to that draft. So like because it sounds like you had a good relationship with the coach. I mean, and that's something that I do talk a lot about here, and something that, not that I took for granted, but I just didn't really, either I didn't put much energy in it, or I never had really that guy that seemed to really like me. Like it was a little bit twofold. But what a great story that is. I mean, so here he has this guy that he saw battling all year for him, puts up big numbers for him, helps him get to the final. Now he's making phone calls on your behalf to say, hey, you got to take a look at this guy. Is that essentially what happened?
Exactly. and then it's such a small world. So Brent Peterson now, so I went through my whole career, go through 7 years in the minors, finally get a chance in Calgary, make the NHL. I'm a free agent or group 6, and guess who calls me from Nashville, because he was assistant coach in Nashville for the Predators. He's like, hey, what are you doing next year? I'm like, I don't know, maybe go back to Chicago. He's like, do you want to come to Nashville? So then I ended up signing 4 years with Nashville. Brent Peterson, my assistant coach for the Predators. And then now he's still part of the organization. He's in broadcasting. He has Parkinson's now, so he's slowed down a little bit. But then he also, when I retired out of the NHL, he calls me. I'm on the way. I'm in St. Louis. I'm going to a game, and I see Brent Peterson calls me. I answer it. I'm like, hey, Petey, what's going on? He's like, you going to play hockey again next year? I'm 38 years old in the NHL in the 4th line role. I'm like, I don't know, Petey. I'm just on my way to the game right now. What's going on? He's like, do you want to do player development for Nashville? I'm like, well, let me get through this season. I'll let you know. And then, so it's just like,
It's amazing.
our lives are just like intertwined. And, now his son is our equipment manager here. I see Brad all the time, and he's got his young family too. So it's good.
So people you meet and this relationships you make, it does mean a lot. You mean, it was something, and I'm not saying this to say that you, and I want to get into how you end up getting the NHL, but like it's funny and interesting in the way that I always thought that just the best of the best were the guys that were going to play there.
Right.
Period. And then, but there's all these different elements that come into play, whether it's opportunity, whether it's an injury, whether it's being ready for that opportunity, whether it's having a guy in that coach's office that says, you know what, let's give this guy another shot. Like I know what he's about, right? So it extends your leash maybe a little bit, right? Like there's a whole bunch of different elements that come there. And I just love hearing that story, because because when you're 17 years old and you're in Portland, you're not manufacturing a relationship. You're just going about your business and playing hockey. Like there must have, did you know there's something about you that he liked? Like, did you know that there was sort of a connection there?
I think maybe my personality and just the way that I played, I don't know, maybe we're like-minded, or you always gravitate to a few of your players too. We had a good time. I like to have a good time. I think I played, and you hit it on the head. Like I thought the same thing. I think it's the best 700 NHL players in the world playing the NHL. It's not even close. There's way better players than me that played. There's way better players in Europe than there are in the NHL, but it is a puzzle. And it's you have to put pieces together. You have to have personalities. You can't have all milk drinkers. You need some personality guys. Like that's what builds a team. And maybe just, I don't know. It was great. It's a great connection. And it's almost like when I haven't spoken to you in 20 years, but we talk that's the bond that we have as athletes, is you just pick up right from where you left off.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. So second year was another great year in Portland. I just love that time, because even for me, who went on to play 10 years pro, a lot of my most vivid memories are from junior. It's so crazy to me. Like a lot of the stuff is just a blur getting into pro, and I haven't even really figured out why that is. But I remember Spoke for sure, and I remember your team, and I remember the T-Birds, and I remember specifically the players on the team, even the line combinations I can remember. And so I think it's interesting just to sit there for a second, because we had some good battles with you guys in that second year. You almost threw up 100 points. You had 40 goals that year as the second year, and then so again. Yeah. You were drafted. How are you able to go to pro the year after that? Or what was your first camp like? Let's dig into that actually. But so you get drafted. Now you're going to camp. You're showing up there at 2 a.m. for 6 o'clock testing the next day. And what's going through your head?
And then you're walking into your hotel room, and there's some guy laying, because you have 2 double beds. You have no idea who it is. So you just brush your teeth, go to bed. You got some stranger beside you, and you wake up the next day, and you're just like, all right, let's do some testing. Hey, what's your name? It's just, people have no idea. It's to get out of your comfort zone. That's why I think hockey players are so well-rounded, because they're very, from age 13, 14, they're staying in hotels sometimes by themselves, or traveling by themselves. Our kids are 15 years old. They travel by themselves, find an Uber now, get to the hotel, check in. It's a lot. But but they have that runway now where I didn't. I just was thrown in there. But no, that first camp was so Buffalo Sabres. First camp, we had Grant Fuhr, McGillney, Howard Chuck, LaFontaine. Then you had Brad May, Rob Ray, Gord Daunt. Like it was like Charlie Huddy. It was a lot of, because we had Muckler was there, so we had a lot of the old Edmonton Oilers guys there. And I just remember skating around the ice, and Patty I'll never forget Patty I'm 11th round pick, 272nd overall. Patty LaFontaine comes up, "Hey Scotty," shakes my hand. I'm like, what the heck? Like that is just so. Right from there, I said, if I ever make it, I am introducing myself to all the rookies, know their names, welcome them, because that was just, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And that back then was like, rookies never made the NHL. It was like such an old boys school where even if we do 6 days of inter squad games and you just beat the shit out of each other, then you finally have an exhibition game. But even if you cheap shot at one of the guys on the opposition team in the inter squad, a guy on your team would fight you on the bench because that's his teammate. You know, like it was just such a different, and there was no 3-hour rule. It was, we were on the ice twice a day, and we'd have enough time just to grab a sandwich, maybe lay down for 20 minutes, and then back to the rink. And this was in Saberland, and all the pigeons were in the basement, no fans. Our gear was wet for like 2 weeks straight. They never dried. And then all the big boys were up top and the fans, whatever. So I remember thinking,
all the pigeons.
I remember thinking, this is pro hockey. I don't know if I want to do it. Like I was just like, and then they give you a wad of meal money. I was like, this is sweet, but we just eat Subway all day. But it was just, it was a lot. It was hard, and it was just exhausting. I couldn't wait to get back to junior after my first year. It was cool, but I was ready to take my meal money and get out of there.
Get out of there. Yeah. Were you running around that camp? Did you get in your share of fisticuffs there, or what was your
I don't think so. Like? I think I was just scooting around. Yeah. I don't think I fought. Would have been maybe my second camp. I think we had a huge brawl against, it was the Hartford Whalers. It was they had like Chris Pronger would have been a rookie then, but they had Lyndon Byers. They had a huge team, and we had a seriously 5-on-5 brawl, like 4 of them with in St. Catharines, neutral zone site. St. Catharines is like a matchbox, and it was just, I don't even know if we finished the game. There's my 3 people left on the bench. It was just a goat rodeo. Like it was just, oh my god.
That's wild.
No, it's been better. So, but our year in.
Well, go ahead.
Our year in Portland, my second year. So I go back to Portland from that camp, and we had a lot of guys like with Jason Weimer, Adam Deadmarsh, Nolan Pratt. Like we had a really Brendan. We had Lonnie Bohannes. Like we had a great team. So we had that year we had 6 40-goal scorers on our team. So we broke a record. Like, can you imagine having 6 40-goal scorers nowadays? Like, and then we were tough and we could score. It was a fun year. And then I think we ended up losing to maybe Kamloops, I think. Third.
Yeah, Kamloops didn't get out of the West. I mean, you had a really good team that year too. I remember that. I was looking at. I remember that at the time actually too, because you came in there with 40. You had a few guys that had 40 or 41, like just got right on the number. And then you had Lonnie that led the way there that year. I want to touch on 2 things. I want to talk about Lonnie, but I also want to talk about Pat or LaFontaine. I think that's amazing that you remember that and what an impact that was for you. Right here you are, right? Whatever it is, 25 years later, talking about Pat LaFontaine and him shaking your hand like that. And, I had a similar scenario, but it was later in my career because I never had that scenario until later in my career where I was 30, and I was a pigeon then too, right? So I started obviously as being a top prospect and this guy that sort of, the older guys would know who I was when I was coming in and stuff. And then, but never really had that environment where it was like, hey, Jay, like, let's go do this, or how's it going, or whatever, right? It was always not like that. But then when I went to Detroit camp at 30, and at that point, pretty much a nobody, like Chris Chelios walked across on the first day, introduced himself, and invited me to his Chili's bar, me and this one other guy. And I hung out with Chris Chelios all day, and he was just the best guy. 45 years old he was, right? Like doing his thing, and like, that environment there I've talked about before on the show was unbelievably inclusive, unbelievably, like the culture there was just phenomenal. And I was like, oh my God, if I could put this jersey on, like I could play in the NHL right now. I just totally felt that, right? And I hurt myself, but it was just amazing the difference that made in feeling comfortable and like you're supposed to be there. It sounds like that made you feel like a little bit like you belong. Even if you want to go home, you're like, wow, this is pretty cool.
That's cool. And it was just, it kind of not put you at par, but it just kind of took the edge off, you know, a little bit. You're just like, oh, you're accepted a little bit. Like we're just all in it together. So it was great. And that wasn't the norm back then for sure.
No,
You know,
I was going to say that because you see that more now, and I mean, in your role, and I want to get there, but like back then, I totally felt like it was us and them, and then us and them. There was us and them, meaning the players against the coaches. I really felt that they were on the other side of the fence, and then there was also like the young guys and the old guys, and you needed somehow to earn your way into that group, and no one was doing you any favors.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, everybody was on 1-year contracts. That's why. Like there's no 5, 6, 7-year contracts back then. Like I think that year Patty LaFontaine signed a 3-year contract, and that was maybe for $1 million a year, and that was huge money. Like 3 years, that was the longest term. But I think that's also why, because everyone, you're scratching and clawing, you're playing for next year as well. So
Yeah.
And there was no salary cap, so you're all making the same money. So you're gonna have, you want older guys. What are these young guys? What have they done? You know, even back then though, but back then it was 3 years in the minors, the minimum. There wasn't many 18-year-old kids, 19-year-old kids coming and playing. Like you really had to sow your oats in the minors for a good 3 years. That was pretty
100%.
much
There's the two-way. There's the one-way or the two-way contracts. That was the big divider, right? If you were a rookie, you had a two-way contract. If you were a veteran, you had a one-way contract. It might not be for a whole whack of money, but it's still a whole lot more than sending you down to the minors, right? Or sending me down to the minors, where you can pay me $45, or you play Jody Hall $800 down to the minors, right? Who are you going to take? No, those are real good points, and I think you're right, because back in those days, without the salary cap, you know, it wasn't an advantage unless you definitely helped your team be better, right? If it was easier to move you down, they moved you down. But let's get back to you. So your first year pro, playing under John Van Boxmeer, which gave me a chuckle because I played for him for a month and a half in Long Beach. What was your impression of your first year? What was your biggest challenge? And we'll talk a little bit about Boxy too.
And I still see Boxy scouts, I think, for LA. So I see Boxy quite a bit just around the rinks and stuff like that. He's the same, looks exactly the same, looks good. But yeah, my first year, like, I think we didn't have internet or what. I feel like a dinosaur talking about it, but it wasn't, I don't even think felt like that long. My first year was 93, 94 maybe. So like, I knew where Buffalo was. I had no idea where Rochester. Where's Rochester, New York? No idea. You know, so I think we had that one show on, I think it was called RinkNet. Maybe it'd come on once a week or something on a Sunday. It was like American League. So I would look on there, oh yeah, Rochester Americans. So that's the only reason, Jody Gage, that's what I knew, Rochester Americans. So anyhow, I get sent down to Rochester, and it's hard. Like those days you only had, you had 3 lines and 1 extra for forwards. So you had 10 forwards. Usually your 10th forward was a big tough guy. Like a Sergio Burge, or Kevin McClellan was on my team my first year, and I watched him in Edmonton Oilers, like just a nut bar, but was great with us. And it was hard. It was, you know, I'm because of my birthday, so I'm there as a 19-year-old. I'm probably the youngest North American guy that could play there, because you have to be, you know, 20 years old if you're North American. So like I played 3 years in the minors, and I wasn't 21 yet, you know, so it was, and I wasn't a very big guy. So Boxy was great. You know, I just buzzed around. I had a really good line that kind of took good care of me, and just scratched and clawed, and just, you know, that's kind of where I, you know, you're not your defining moment, but you kind of evaluate, what am I? Like I scored 11 goals or something like that my first year. Like I'm 5 foot nothing, 150 pounds. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to make the NHL by scoring goals. So I better be good in the face-off circle. I better have lots of energy. I better buzz around and hit guys. And then hopefully when I get a chance, and my skill can take over, and I'll get some chances. But I never played power play. So I'm like, well, let's be the number 1 guy over the boards to kill penalties. So that's kind of where my, you know, they and myself were like, okay, some kids take a little bit longer because I think they're going to score goals and get to the NHL, where I was like, right from the start, I'm like, I don't have this kind of skill set. So and just
So you
kind of
figured that
buzz
out on your
around.
own, or was that Boxy helping you, or the Buffalo Sabres in general
Boxy,
helping you?
yeah, Boxy helped me quite a bit, and we had good teams. That team that year we didn't really have a great team. I don't even think we made the playoffs. And then my second year, um, John Tortorella came in,
Right.
and that was it's always your second year pro is always the hardest because you're not the rookie anymore. You got new rookies coming in, so I was probably a healthy scratch until probably Christmas when Torts came in, and then after he kind of went through his gauntlet of guys, I just finally got a chance, and then we ended up winning the Calder Cup. In our line was Scott Medcalf, myself, and Dan Frawley, two older grizzled guys. Dan Frawley was captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins, I think before Mario was. Scott Medcalf was first round pick to the Edmonton Oilers back then, but he could never make it because it's Edmonton Oilers, and those guys really helped me. We just kind of really solidified into our role of like a checking, buzzing line, and we played Barry Trotz's Portland Pirates for the Calder Cup championship. And then, of course, full circle, Trotzy coaches Nashville, Brent Peterson here. That's why I get to Nashville.
Well, you guys win it, right? I mean, I definitely want to touch. So you guys win it your second year. I didn't realize you were out of the lineup though that year. I was going to say, like, first of all, I want to point out too, because I got some younger listeners that listen to this show, and so you go from a 40 goal campaign, 53 points, almost 100 point campaign in the WHL, one of the best junior leagues in the world, and then you go to pro and you get 11 goals your first year playing 71 games, right? Like everyone thinks that they're going to be there, that they're this type of guy, right? And I keep saying again and again and again, right? Every time you step up, it gets harder and harder, right? To be that guy. And I talk a lot about adaptability, right? And I think you hit it right in the head, because there's one thing of liking hockey, but a lot of guys only like hockey a certain way. Like I like playing this way. I like being the guy in the point and doing the one timer. And I like doing this, like doing that. But if I'm not able to do that, now you're asking me to do what? I don't even think that's hockey. I mean, a lot of guys aren't able to adapt and do something else. So, like, first of all, good on you to be able to do that. But second, like, were you ever worried about, like, holy smokes, I might not even be good enough to play here? Like, when you started getting healthy scratch and stuff, and now, like, what's next for me kind of deal? Like, where was that challenge, like that real challenge in that second year?
Well, I think, again, I have my high school diploma, all my eggs in one basket. What am I going to do? Like every year I always saw guys leave, go to Europe, never come back. I was like, I'm young. Like, it's just another lesson to go through. And it sucked. Like, the team would go on the road and I'd stay back in Rochester. Like, it sucked. We had a new coach with Torts and we didn't have a great year. So John Tortorella brought his guys in, and I had another year on my contract as entry level. So 2 more years, but those are the years where you had your Team Canada. So do I want to go back to Calgary, play Team Canada, go to Europe, travel all over Europe, play Team Canada, play Spengler Cup, all that kind of stuff? And I'm like, I just hung in there and practiced my bag off and just worked hard. And then we had injuries. He finally put me in, and then it just clicked and never took me back out. And we were a huge part of, the success of our year that year. But it had to go through the guys, and it was that's just the way it was. And I was fortunate that turned out that way. And then after that, it was not smooth sailing at all, but it was, at least it felt more of a team part of it.
But how do you dig in there? Like, I mean, I saw your first of all, so from a guy who's getting healthy scratches, team's going on the road, you're in your second year pro, you're not even 20 years old yet, right? Or maybe just turned 20. You're in Rochester, New York, right? And you're like, oh my God, like this is pro hockey, right? These guys are leaving. I can't get in the lineups. New coach. I'm sure Torts was back in his yelling and screaming days. And then from that scenario, you end up winning a championship. You have 13 points in 19 games. You end up being a big part of that team. Like, how did you get through that? Like, what was your mentality? Were you just showing up and trying to do the best you can in practice? Did you stay positive with that, or do you remember how you handled it?
Just grinded. That's it. I think that's just shut your mouth and work. Be the last guy off the ice. Just be there first and just work. That's and just hang around and get your chance. Sometimes guys are going to get 9 chances. Some guys are going to get 1 or 2. And I got a chance, and I think it was Adirondack. I might have scored a couple goals or 3 goals, I think, that game, and I never came out again.
Come on,
other
that was
than
your
probably
first game
take us
back in?
Adirondacks. So
Good for you.
it was good. It was just,
That's awesome.
yeah, I don't know. It just, that kind of has been the storybook of my whole
Sure.
career. You know, I just, anytime there was a divide, a fork in the road, it was just kind of hung in there. And then I usually had some success when kind of cleared a little bit, but it
That's
was
awesome.
good. It was a good run. That was, and I ended up playing, I don't know, 6 years, I think, in Rochester. And then
Yeah.
we ended up buying a house there and going back there. And once I retired, we lived there. So it was like my
Right.
community.
Turned into
So
home for you. No, it is home, I guess, or was. You got your first 2 games in the show there, though, that year, too.
and that's why. So I go from a healthy scratch, not playing seriously till probably Christmas, and then having a great run playing. What did I end up? 170 penalty minutes, like in 60 games. So fighting, clawing, being a rat, throwing guys' chains in the stands. Like just with Torts, it was like 5-on-5 brawls every game. Like we had. So I'll go back. So we had one coach. Torts was our coach. We had one equipment manager, Pete Rogers. That was it. That was all on the bench. We didn't have any assistant coaches. Didn't have anything.
Come on.
Torts ran the whole show. Ran the bench, ran the forwards, ran the D, did all the video, and ran it. So he must have been kicked out 5 or 6 times a year. He'd run down the bench and kick the glass down in between the 2 benches in Rochester. So it'd fall down and it would be 5-on-5 brawl. And so he'd get booted. We had no coach. So our trainer would coach us. So I'd bring our trainer like coffee and donuts every other day, but just in case, maybe it throws me on the power play. So now guess where our equipment trainer is? Nashville. So our equipment guy's here in Nashville. So it's been those stories of Torts, him. Oh my, it was good. He made you compete. He made you, like, Boxy was hard, on us, but Torts was like a totally different level. Like he made it so he cared about us so much, but it was like our inner circle. Nobody from the outer circle could ever come into the inner circle, and he was ruthless with us. But we stuck together. It wasn't like okay, we're gonna play because we hate this guy. He brought us to another level, and it was we were a hard team to play against by the end of the year, that's for sure. And it was gratifying. It was really good.
I love that, the bench getting ran by the trainer in pro hockey. That's
pro
amazing.
Hockey. Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story about Boxy. So I got when I was in St. John's, it was the second time I got traded in the trade deadline. So the first one was from Florida to Toronto, and then I was in Toronto for 2 years or whatever, and then I got traded on the deadline to LA from Toronto. So when I got notified of the trade, the way that it came down to me was that I was going to start in Long Beach. I knew I was going to Long Beach. But I think that they confused who was either that I got it confused or they got it confused. Like they gave me like the game schedule was like that I wasn't going to be playing for three days, but I think that was like the Kings schedule. So anyways, that night the boys all took me out, right? In St. John's, and in St. John's doesn't close, right? So I never closed. So like I went straight to the airport, right? Like straight, had my stuff packed straight to the airport. And you couldn't fly any longer in North America, right? From St. John's, Newfoundland to Long Beach, right? So flying all day, right? 4.5-hour time change, roll into Long Beach, got my bags, haven't eaten, like peanuts on the plane, right? And I walk into hungover, walk into the locker room, and all the jerseys are up, and there's Podollan, number 11, in one of the stalls, and Boxy's the only one there, and he goes, "Hey, nice to meet you." I'm like, "Yeah, nice to meet you too." And he goes, "You ready to go tonight?" What do you say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good, coach.
Yeah. Good to go. So like back to the hotel, like half an hour sleep, try and get some pasta. All the brass is there. Dave Taylor, like everyone from the Kings was at that game. They had me on the point on the power play. I've never in my life had I played the point of the power play. Anyway, so that was my first run with Boxy. We did okay. We ended up getting kind of 8 points in 8 games for him. We got knocked out in the second round. He was a pretty good guy, but I didn't get to know him that well. That was my first face in the IHL, John Van Boxmeer, me with no sleep coming off the plane. I imagine how I looked. He's like, "Who is this guy?"
Newfoundland to Long Beach.
Yeah, make that trip.
That's nice.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So
my last 2 games, so I get called up my last 2 games. My last game was the last game in the odd. So my first NHL game was in Washington in the old building. I don't even know what they called it back then. So I'm like all jacked up. So Torts calls me. Like I have no idea. Like we'd watch like NHL Tonight on we're never dialed into Buffalo. So it was just like, so Torts called me. It's like, Scotty, and he goes through the whole spiel. You're going to drive to Buffalo tomorrow, practice in the morning, fly to Washington, play in Washington, come home. And I'm just like this on the phone, house phone. I'm like, and look at my face is like ghost white. And I'm like, who is this? And he's like, and then he starts swearing and yelling at me on the phone. I'm like, okay, hold on, Torts, let me write this down. So then I go to Buffalo, and so I fly, practice with him, like, and then we fly to Washington. And Daryl Shannon is my roommate, and just awesome. Played a long time, not because he's a good player, like he's a good shutdown D, but he was just the best guy. So Daryl Shannon's my roommate, and he's going to the White House to like drive cars, shoot guns, and they had back then the FBI would take a bunch of guys and go underground. There's a big track, I guess they used to always go to, and so he comes back, and I'm just hanging in the hotel, and there's 2 games left. They're totally out of the playoffs, and I just remember him saying, "Hey, these are your first 2 games. Don't take them lightly." Or I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like the other guys are kind of on cruise control, and so we play against Washington, and my first period, I'm like, it felt like I never played the game ever. I was so gassed. I'm laying it on the floor in front of the fan. Like, probably played 5 shifts, and it felt like, how am I going to do this? So I look over, and there's Craig Berube, Dale Hunter, and Kevin Kaminsky. So my line is Rob Ray, Brad May, and myself. I'm like, geez. Drop the bucket. I skate right through the Gonchar and try and fight them. I'm like, I'm not doing anything with these guys. So, and then we flew home, and then our next night was the last game in the odd, and we took the banners down, and it was quite cool. And then had a long run with Rochester and won the Calder Cup that year.
So do you know how or why you got called up? Was it a reward essentially, or somebody get hurt?
Yeah, probably just a reward. I think it was my last year of my contract. I might have only signed a 2-year deal. And then, so they're probably just kind of seeing, can this guy play? Or there's probably more of a reward. Like Torts probably said, give this guy a couple games. What's the big deal? So it's
interesting. You played with Mayday. There's a Leaf alumni trip that we just had a few months ago, and he was on it, and we sat together in the bus quite a bit and shot the shit. He seems like a really good guy. Kind of great stories. I didn't realize you had a chance to play with him there. It's pretty cool.
Thanks so much. Just going to take a short break here and just remind everyone to please review and share the podcast. That is the ultimate way to help grow this thing, is your word of mouth, and by you leading digital reviews. So if you like the content, if you like what you're hearing, please take the time. It doesn't take long, and share the episode or review the episode. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to the interview.
You had 10 PIMs though, I saw. What were the PIMs? Was it a 10-minute misconduct or
10-minute misconduct? Yeah, I swore at the ref, I think, so he booted me. So that was my second game in the NHL. I played I think I got a 10 in the second period. I think I drove the net and I got hauled down, and I just was like, what the? And the ref's like, get to the box.
Get out of here, rookie.
So,
don't talk to me like
exactly.
that. That's awesome.
So the year after, so you win the cup. I was going to give a shout out to Dixon Ward, actually. Dixon Ward just lit it up that year. I saw it. He was had a great playoff and was your number 1 guy. He's running the OHA here in the Okanagan now at Hockey Academy. That's doing pretty well. Yeah. So what was he like to play with? Was he pretty good?
He was good. He was very skilled. He was kind of up and down with us in Buffalo, and then after us winning the Calder Cup and then being the MVP in the playoffs, and he just springboarded right to Buffalo. We never saw him again. And I think he signed maybe a couple more years after that with Buffalo.
Right. Good.
So when I was playing with, who was I with? Maybe Nashville. We were in Phoenix, and he had his little guys there. He came into the dressing room and and I talked to Wardle for a while. It's good. He's doing well there. He's putting a lot of good players through there.
Did other guys take off from that? I mean, I've had some guys on, like when you win a championship in the minors, that it usually springboards quite a few guys, and
for sure,
which is interesting, right? Because it's such an individual league. You mean and I mean that in the sense that everybody there wants to be somewhere else. You know, like they're trying to be somewhere else. So they're trying to worry about their own stats and they're trying to worry about doing their thing and getting noticed, which isn't necessarily conducive to winning anything because you need to be a team to win something.
Right.
But when you do have success as a team, the individuals have success at that level generally.
No, it's true. Like everybody wants a winner. And even like now that you look at, so with my job now, I look at Charlotte. Charlotte won the American League, the Calder Cup last year. Geez, 12 guys probably left. 12 or 13 guys left their team, got big raises, and went on and signed with other teams. Like I think it was Brian Holzinger went up, Dixon Ward went up. I think Doug Huda was just a veteran, grizzled NHL player. He came down with the best that we wouldn't have won if we didn't have Hoods. And then he signed a one way with the Island, and he probably prolonged his career for another 3 or 4 more years. Now he's assistant coach in Detroit, and he was assistant coach in Boston. He was assistant coach in Rochester before all that. Like it just winning and going far in playoffs and playing till June. There's nothing better, and it really does help your career. And you hit it on the head with the American League. Is such a hard league because you're a little bit. You want to be a team guy. You're a little bit of an independent contractor. You want to get to the NHL, but you have to play within a team system. Maybe you don't like your coach the way he's playing you because you think you're something else. Like and you're a young kid and you're trying to live on your own. You're trying to cook your own meals. You're balancing all these things on top of hockey and being part of a team. And guys have kids, some have girlfriends, some have wives. Like it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but
Totally a mixed bag. Totally a mixed bag. And it's interesting too at that level because you have the guys that are 30 when you're 20. Those guys that are 30 feel, to me, they felt like they were like 50. You know, like is there such a separation in that hockey era because you grow up and you have posters on your wall of the guys you end up playing with. Like it's so crazy. Like it happens so fast. These guys that you idolized or saw at someplace and now they're married with kids and they're doing all these things. It is a completely different mixed bag, like you say, and you got to find your own way in it. You're in Rochester for, like you said, 5-6 years.
Yeah. So
you won the championship. You end up having 22 goals. Your third year was your best year offensively. Then you end up getting then I saw your games played go down, then you start not playing in the playoffs. Like what all happened during that little stretch there, like that last 3 years?
So I went through shoulder surgery, blew my shoulder out, so I blew my shoulder out, I think in Chicago. So I finally get called up. I may almost make Buffalo out of training camp. That was a year Teddy Nolan got let go, coach of the year. They fired him or he resigned. Lindy Ruff came in. So I had a really good year of training camp that year. Went to Europe with the team, had training camp there. I was one of the few that went. And then they sent me to Rochester. You know, we always have a bunch of guys at the end of the year. So some guys got hurt, some weren't playing well. Called me up, played a couple games, blew my shoulder out in Chicago. So, of course, I want to get back. So then I try and rush back again, blow it out again. So then I tried to play with a harness and a chain so my shoulder couldn't move, and then just kept popping out. So I ended up having shoulder surgery that year, then rehabbed all year, came back, played 30 or 40 games, blew my ACL out. So came back, rehabbed. Next year, almost exact same time, February again, blew my other ACL out. So I had shoulder and 2 ACLs in 3 years. And then I was just like, and so then the year that I came and played with you guys, or when I was in Detroit, and then you came, I don't know, halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. So that was my first year where I was kind of, you know, I had to change it up. You know, it was just kind of a little bit of so that was hard. But then I look at it, it taught me how to work out, taught me how to be, you know, have a schedule, have a routine. And, you know, I know it sucked not playing, only playing 30, 40 games those few years. And we actually had really good teams. So I'd come back and play and do well and get hurt. And so I played 6 years in Rochester, and we ended up going to the Calder Cup finals 3 of those 6 years. So we had really good teams there, and I wanted to be a part of it. And then I got hurt, so I'd be the eye in the sky at the headset with the coaches, like just trying to stay involved. And I don't know where my path was. Like, that's 6 years in the minors. Where else am I going to do? Maybe I was going to get into coaching or what. So
yeah.
It was tough. It was really
No,
tough.
that's wild. So yeah, so those were injuries then. So those 3 years in a row were injuries. Your deal then is obviously then I guess done at the end of that year, 99, 2000.
Mhm.
How did you end up in Detroit? Was it a Tampa Bay contract or was it an AHL deal?
I had the IHL contract. I couldn't get. I could have went back to Rochester. I needed a change of scenery, and then that was a tough summer. Like I was ready to go, and Torts was the head coach in Toronto or in Tampa Bay. So Tortorella's like, so I went to Tampa Bay's camp, but I had an IHL contract, but I didn't sign that till probably the end of probably August. Like I didn't have anything. I was like, what am I? Do I want to come back to Rochester? I can, but I think I need a break. I need a change. And then I went there, and we didn't have a great team, and Tampa training camp was hard. I was basically 5 months out of an ACL, so like I'm just trying to grind through the Tortorella training camp on one leg, and then I went down to Detroit, and we had that year. I had a couple injuries that year with concussions and stuff, but that was a tough year. That was really tough.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at that year. I revisited that year, and mentally and statistically, right? So like, and for me personally, I don't think I've talked about it here on the show, but that was a really strange year because I had gone from being traded for Yannick Perreault to the Kings, leading the minor leagues in goal scoring, had 47 goals that one year at 21 years old, right? Go to LA. Do okay there. But again, it sounds like it was almost like how it was with you when you went to Buffalo for your first 2 games, because LA was out of the playoffs when I first got there, right? So the last 5 games that I played with them, like no one gave a shit, yet I was supposed to, right? And I did, but I had a really hard time going 110% when everybody else was going 80. It was just, you know what I mean? Like it was kind of a weird thing for me. So bad for me, but like over the summer, Andy Murray came in. That was maybe another issue because every time I got traded, the GM got fired that traded for me. So we had a new coach that came in, and we had a new GM that came in. So Dave Taylor came in and Andy Murray. And Andy Murray wanted me to bulk up that year. He said, get bigger. He goes, you're going to be filling either a third or fourth line role as a wing. We want you to be, about 250. So that was like the most communication I had in a long time from anybody, right? And I'm like, okay, I can do this, right? Like, which was actually refreshing, to be honest, because like instead of being the guy that was supposed to score at the NHL level yet not getting any minutes, I'd rather just have a role, right? And just go do that role and not have the pressure of trying to produce when you're not really getting power play or anything, right? So I was okay with that. So I went, and it's a long-winded story to tell something you might remember. I'm sure you don't. But anyway, so I that summer I worked my ass off, right? I was trying to get bigger, bulking up, like doing everything in the world I could. Came to camp at 215. I was squatting like 450 pounds and like, just a big, strong 6'2", ready to go, right? Anyways, Brad Chartrand ends up making that team. Who in St. John's, like Shardy and I, if I saw him, we'd still be buddies. Like I lived with him in LA for a little while there at camp, but like, when he came to St. John's, he couldn't have tied my skates. You know what I mean? Like like I wouldn't even consider it in the same realm, And then like he ends up making the team, but he was Andy Murray's assistant captain for the national team, right? So then he takes, and then I got let go on the waiver. So whatever that waiver thing is. So like I thought I was going to make camp. I couldn't even get my contract signed. They wouldn't give me a raise. I took a pay cut for scoring 47 goals in the minors. I end up getting, and then I get taken on that waiver wire thing or whatever, and Tampa Bay takes me. So that was when I ended up going to Tampa, right? So which was Detroit. So Tampa was awful that year, Scotty.
Awful.
I looked them up. Like I knew they were bad, but I can't remember they were that. They were 59 points they had that year, right? And we were worse. Like the Vipers were awful, and they had all these young guys. I thought, like, whatever. I mean, it was so hard to produce there. You were minus 37. I think I was minus 28 or something, right? Like, it was the lowest point totals I had in my career. The only good player I think we had there was Nils Ekman. Like, I remember him being good.
Yeah, he was good.
And then everybody else, but all these guys were going up too. But you and I never went anywhere, right? Like,
no.
Like, I mean, I wrote down the names. It seemed like the whole team got called up to Tampa Bay, yet no one ever, for me personally, that year was so weird. No one talked to me. I never got called up. Was like they chose to take me off the waivers. Like it was just it was a surreal moment. But in saying all that, Bradshaw was there, Bobby J was there, and you talk about coaches coming back in your life. I know that you played with for Bradshaw again later in St. Louis. But what was your memory of that year? Like,
just, I think we had the biggest team, but the softest, and we were all Euros. We had a ton of European guys. It was just kind of, I think that's where Tampa, we had a lot of high picks because they haven't been good for a while. But I remember the guys, you couldn't get them off the ice at practice or pregame skate. Like, they were so excited, and then the game time would come around, and they'd just be like they hated the game, but they loved the practice. I was just like, and I came from Rochester. We came from winning programs. I was like, this makes no sense. Like, and then it was just like a carousel of guys, like, because even the Vipers back in the day they might have beat some NHL teams with Jimmy Carson, and Samsonov was on there. Like, they would charter everywhere, and that wasn't us. It was, I think they knew it was the last year in the IHL, and it was all kind of they would fold, or everything would go into the American League. So that was probably my most trying year out of even all my surgeries, everything. That was a tough year. And when they say winning is a habit, it 100% is a habit. When you have a habit of winning all the time, and then you get thrown into a situation like that, where there's still guys that care on that team, but when other guys don't have that, that's why you're not successful.
Well, and that was part of that culture too. And I mean, I hate to put myself in the I cared category, but I mean, that was like the year for me, because it was a little bit of it was a moment in time for me where it's like, okay, this is a big season for me, right? Like, I've had these 2 trades, I've done real well in the minors. Like, I need to do something different. So, like, for me, it was like, this is me being serious Jason Podollan, right? Like, I was trying to create this new sort of character aspect, and I was going to do things differently. I wasn't going to go out as much. Like, I told you about my workout program, which was funny. That's why it was funny, because I nutrition at the time, nobody knew anything. Everything that I was doing was whole milk, whey protein, everything,
Bench
cheese,
press.
all this stuff, right? To get bigger. And it turns out now I know I'm lactose intolerant. So, like, I was so bloated and so slow that year. The slowest I ever was, the biggest I ever was, but I was strong, but I couldn't move. I had gas. I'd clear out the locker room all the time, right? And everyone thought it was funny. We were laughing our heads off, but I was actually, like, poisoning myself. Like, so funny, but trying to do what's right, and you end up poisoning yourself in the process. But yeah, so I mean, I was in this scenario too, where I was like, okay, like, we got to win. And, like, it was so frustrating. And then seeing all these guys who didn't give her a rip get called up, right? Come back down. Like, so, like, as far as, like, they did wonders there in Tampa Bay to change that culture around, because it was gross, man. For them to be that bad up top and that bad down below, and for them to reward guys who shouldn't have been rewarded, like, that's cancer throughout the whole thing. Yeah. And I couldn't get out there quick enough. And the reason I wanted to spend so much time there is just because it was awful. That was by far the worst pro experience that I had, just because of the team and our lack of success and, like, what it was all about. You were on that team. You had 7 goals that year. That was your worst year as a pro. And guess what, man? You never came back to the minors again. Like, you've made the NHL the next year. Like, how the hell did that happen? What happened? And, like, walk me through that. Like, now you're an NHLer after that.
Yeah, whoever thought, you have a year like that. That was probably, and then when July 1st is free agency. From that year on, it was June 28th, 29th. Teams would be sniffing for me to sign with them. And I kind of learned right from then, whatever team reached out first, I would sign with them. I always signed. Once I established myself in the NHL, I always signed league minimum contracts, and I always went with the first team that reached out, because usually I was first on their list. So, and then I think that's why I played so long. But that year, I was like, 7 goals, whatever I had, minus 40. I'm not getting another job. And then July 1 came around, June 30th, came around. My Hayden, my son, that was his birthday. He was born on June 30th, and Calgary called. He's like, yeah, we'd like to give you a 2-way contract and this and that. I'm like, all right. So I signed a 2-year contract, 2-way contract with Calgary, knowing I'm probably going to go down to St. John, be the leader down there, play in the minors, help develop the young guys, all that kind of stuff. I'm a Calgary guy. I'm 25 years old. I played, maybe five NHL games at 25. So you're pretty much a career minor leaguer, 7 years in the minors. So I signed the contract. It's great. We're going to have a little stability and stuff. I'm like, it's a defining moment. I'm 25. We had a good group. We had myself, we had Dane Jackson, a bunch of guys in Rochester, Giantas, Callahans, these guys. And then we just trained our ass off that summer. Didn't miss a day, did the track, did the weights, did all that stuff, skated. We're 24, 25 years old, do it all in the morning, golf in the afternoon. We're all young. We're all married. So it was a fun time. And that's where we'd always go back to Rochester. And that's why I went there, is because we skated and we can work out. Cost of living was cheap. I think we bought our house for $82,000. I'm a Calgary guy. I couldn't even afford to go back to Calgary. I didn't make any money. So that was our home base. And then Rochester was our hub, our home base for, until we moved last year. So probably 20 some years. So and then, went to training camp, and I was in good shape. I beat Jerome McGinley out of testing. So I was the fittest Flame. And right from there, the guys were like, Greg Gilbert was our coach. Brad McCrimmon was our assistant coach. They didn't make playoffs. They're looking for a spark. I came in. I didn't give a shit. I didn't really care what anybody thought of me. I just came in there and fought and made a mark on myself. Our camp was in Banff, and then I never looked back. I remember Chuck Kovasu was the high junior kid coming in. He couldn't come to an agreement on his contract. Basically, it's between Chuck and I. And it's the last day of camp. We're splitting camp after this. Next day is the regular season. He's not on the ice, didn't come to terms. So he goes back to, I think, Kelowna. I think he played his last year in Kelowna. And Greg Gilbert skates around. He's like, Scotty, can you play wing? And I said, Gibby, I'll play whatever you want as long as I'm still here. He's like, that's the answer I wanted to hear. So we get off practice. I look in the dressing room. Calgary has their jerseys hanging. So I peek my head in the dressing room. My jersey's hanging. We have team picture. That's just what they did back then. Team picture, first day of camp. I go back into the locker room. And after that, I call on the house phone, call mom and dad, said, I made it. So
I remember, man. Oh, it was so amazing. That's ridiculous.
It was so hard. Like I think Chris Clark was my roommate at the hotel. I wouldn't, as soon as the practice was over, I would drive to mom and dad's house and just sleep and ice bath. And I just poured everything I could into that camp because I knew this is it. This is my last chance. And then I'd have dinner there, and then I'd drive back to the hotel at 7 or 8 at night and go to sleep there. But I just had to, it just took everything out of me. And then, so I made it. And then we actually had a really good start, and that helped a lot because we went 10-0 to start my first year in Calgary. We had Roman Turek. We had a great start, hot start. I didn't play a whole lot of minutes, but at the beginning, and then, they didn't want to change anything up. And I stayed there the whole year and on a two-way. So I was when you're on a two-way contract, you're always tiptoeing around. But we ended up not making playoffs. And we went on a 10-game slide, but that was my first chance. Hometown kid. I think that helped too, and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, keeping you home and get you into the daddy role, and I know that kind of changed me a lot. Having kids for sure, it forces you to grow up and look at things a little different.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I can't emphasize that enough. That's nuts, right? To be minus 37 with 7 goals, 7-year minor leaguer, right? And then just come up and to make camp, and the mindset you had to have going into that. Like you said, you worked your tail off all summer, and you just had that I don't give a shit what anyone thinks of me attitude. That's so cool to me, because there's a different mentality, right? When you're relentless like that, I assume. And did you just try and embrace that then the rest of your career? Because you were pretty relentless even before that. But I mean, you obviously turned it up to another notch.
But I think I had 6 years. I had 8 training camps in Buffalo. So that's a lot of training camps. I see Curtis Brown, Wayne Primo. At the beginning, I'm like, no, I have no chance I can play in the NHL. But as more years I got into training camps, you figure it out, and they're not that hard. You know what to do. So it was all kind of like just like perfect storm, kind of all came together. I was injured. We had a crappy year in Detroit, all that kind of stuff. And I just was like, what do I have to lose? I have a 2-year deal. What do I have to lose? My whole goal was be the first guy called up. That was my goal going into Calgary, be the first call up guy. And I stayed there. I remember Christy flew in from Rochester, and everyone in Rochester's watching the first game, all that kind of stuff. After the first 2 weeks, we get the paycheck. We're walking, like, I think we're at the Hyatt, walking to the bank. I'm like 4 different times, hey, you got the check, you got the check, you got the check. Like, I was making 275 or something like that. I think I signed 275 over, I don't even know, 50 or something. But yeah, it was just, and the mom and dad are there. That's why I went to high school there. Like, it was cool. It was
awesome.
it was good.
Awesome.
But the thing was, you get yourself on the map. Like, and then I, beat Iggy out. Iggy was mad because he's always the fittest Flame. And then that's kind of opened everyone's eyes right from then.
That is amazing. Yeah, that's super cool. And Chuck Obasu is a guy that lives here in the summer. He's actually a buddy. He plays around, and that's interesting. And there's an opportunity, right? Because who knows, right? I mean, if Chuck Obasu, and he's supposed to be the shiny new penny, he comes to a deal and he's there, then maybe you're the easy one to let go, right?
Yeah,
so you stepped into the opportunity and made the most of it. And like you said, once you're there, all of a sudden everyone knows you're there. So now you're a guy who's there, right? Like you get over that hump of like having to establish yourself, right? Like you are now established. And mind you, had to follow it up the next year. If you couldn't have done it the next year, to very well have just been, oh, I know he is a minor leaguer, right? But you came back and made that team again. And that was under new coaches too, correct? In Calgary?
That was tough because Daryl Sutter came in probably halfway through.
Right.
Gibby got let go, and then Daryl came in, and I was like, great, this is going to be awesome. Like, Daryl, I'm his type. I'm a Sutter type of player, So, and then he came in, he didn't like me, and so I didn't play. I was like, oh, I'd be in and out of the lineup and all this stuff. So you just never know. Like,
but never sent you down.
No, never sent me down though. But I stayed, so that was good.
Right.
But after the trade deadline, all that kind of stuff, I was just trying to. And that's what I said, your second year pro. So basically I took 2 different seasons. Like, my second year pro in Rochester was kind of like my second year in Calgary, because you're not the shiny new toy. You got your draft picks like Chuck Kobus coming and playing on our team. Like, and I'm a 4th line guy. Like, you're not changing your top 2 lines too often. You're changing probably your 3rd, 4th line guys all the time. So
yeah,
every training camp sucked for me. You always have to battle just to keep your spot. And I'm not the biggest guy, so these big muties are coming in. They're like, I'm bigger than this kid or whatever. So you're fighting, scratch and clawing every camp.
Right.
It's all good. Makes you good.
It is good. And then you win on, and this show is more about like that process of making it, not necessarily all the cool NHL stories once you do get there. Like, I think that you getting there is amazing. I also think it's amazing you end up playing till 37, like after making it at 25 to play as long as you did. Like, amazing testament to you to stick around and stay relevant. Like you said, like to know your role and to do what you were asked. There's so many elements to that. One of which I wouldn't mind touching on is maybe just the element of being a good guy, like being a good hockey guy, being a good teammate, because you mentioned that with Huda coming down and how you saw that as an example in Rochester. Like, I think, it doesn't get overlooked in the hockey world, but I think it gets overlooked for the guys trying to get into the hockey world, like what that actually means. Do you think that was part of your reason for having such longevity?
I think so. I think that's why I'm in a position where I'm in right now as well. The people I surrounded myself were like Doug Huda, Randy Cunningworth, like those guys. Like, I gravitated to those guys. And if you look at our team here in Nashville right now, you have Roman Yossi, Ryan Ellis, you had Shea Weber. Like, you have these guys, they're the best people. And you think all these guys are NHL guys, they're the best. You give them a free t-shirt, those guys will wear it. Like, even if they're making $10 million, they're just down to earth. Like, the guys who have a chip on their shoulder, they don't make it, or they don't stick around long enough. It's a funny business that way. You got to carry yourself in the right way, and you probably get more opportunity that way as well. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of where my career, I've always signed basically 2-year contracts. My first year, really excited to be with the team. My second year, basically, I'm developing the next fourth line young guy to come take my spot. And that's pretty much what I did my whole career in the NHL is, so, and I was good with it. That's the way it is. And then I'd always sign, June 30th or whatever and move on and get my salary low so I could play on some really good teams.
No, that's wild. And I want to touch, you end up going on, 4 years with Nashville, who you're working with now. And I definitely want to get to the player development stuff that you're doing. But that San Jose team was a real good team that you were on. And that's why I just wanted to touch on that team because, you're in the NHL, but there is a few different stops you can have and an experience with a few different players where it's like it actually feels like this is the NHL, right? And playing with Marleau and Thornton in their prime and going to the third round of the playoffs, like that's the real deal. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that, your experience with San Jose and what your takeaways were from?
Well, San Jose was so I spent 4 years in Nashville. Nashville was great. Like the year out of the Calgary, Chicago signed me to my first one-way contract. So that was the year like, all right, I'll sign. I go back to that story, June 30th, they came and said, hey, my agent couldn't even get a hold of me. I'm in the hospital. Christy's having Hayden, all that stuff. And they're like, yeah, Chicago wants to sign you one way. And guess who? It's Brian Sutter. So it's Daryl's brother. So go to Chicago. We didn't have a very good team that year, and that was kind of remind me a little bit of the Detroit days in the NHL where it was a grind. And then I went then we had the lockout year. So I went over to London, played for the Racers during the lockout year just because I wanted to keep playing. And I would commute back and forth from Chicago. We stayed in Chicago. And then, Nashville called me and I was a group 6, so I could be a free agent. And then I ended up signing there. And then just going through Chicago, like our national team, we had Paul Kariya, Peter Forsberg. We had great teams there, like Chemo Timonen, like we had Scotty Hart and all. Like we had a really good team for a lot of years, and we made playoffs every year on just like no budget at all. And scratched and clawed, we'd lose guys and bring guys in, and we still would Barry Trotz to get the most out of us. And I think that kind of just kept learning all those different learning experiences. And then I think really my last year in Nashville, I had a bad concussion, only played 40 some games and then never thought I'd play in the NHL again. And San Jose called me at July 1. I think they were President Trophy winners. They might've lost to Anaheim the year before, and Anaheim was the 8th seed and they got knocked off kind of like Tampa Bay did last year. And so they called and they wanted my medical reports, all that kind of stuff. And I ended up signing in San Jose, and it was awesome. I love Nashville, and I played with superstars, but it was just like it was a different level. Like we were big, physical, went to the Western Conference final 2 years in a row. Like the guys on our roster between Rob Blake to Ryan Clough to Patty to, Jumbo to Pavelski, like Danny Heatley, we had a big trade for Heater. So Heater was my roommate for 2 years. Like it was legit. We just couldn't get through Vancouver and couldn't get through Chicago.
Right. What was was there any hole, do you think? Like that is one of those organizations. It's like they've been so close so many times, and there is such a fine line between winning and losing, and sometimes it's not obvious. Like, did you think there was something there?
Oh yeah, I think we lost to Chicago. They had a good team. We were just my second year, we were playing Vancouver. We're playing Detroit. We're up 3-0 on Detroit. It was like 3-2. I don't know, 2 minutes left in the third period. Datsuk scores to tie it. Then they win it. Now the series 3-1, and we couldn't win a game. They took us all the way to Game 7. So traveling back and forth from San Jose to Detroit. So instead of us having 2 weeks off to play Vancouver, we're beat up. Then fly out back to Vancouver, play there. Jumbo, I think he hurt his shoulder early in Detroit or late in the Detroit series, so he would have been healthy. He was playing with one shoulder against Vancouver, and we had it all. I think we had size, we had grit, we had scoring, power play was sick, penalty kill was good, our goaltending was okay. You have to be lucky, and we couldn't get lucky those 2 years. And Like we had Manny Malholtra. We had all the pieces of winning face-offs to special teams to scoring, and
Yeah.
it was good. It was those were some fun times.
Who was the best guy you played with?
So many different personalities and skill set. Probably early on, just Paul Kariya, the way that, just his routine. I think he loosened up a little bit with our group in Nashville. And he was probably kind of the first superstar, I guess, that free agent that would come to Nashville in those days. So there's so many, like Jumbo, unbelievable personality, just the horse, like sees the ice, brings the team. Like that was probably the first time where our star player, like, was our star player, right from like him, Patty, like they're in the gym on the ice, like they really led by Pavelski, really led by example, and you had nothing. What could you say? You had to follow him,
Yeah.
Jerome McGinley was just he would do it all, fight, score. Didn't have a whole lot of supporting cast, I think, his days in Calgary, but I don't know. And then I go to St. Louis. We had like TJ Oshie, Tarasenko, David Backus. Like we had really good teams there as well. Just couldn't. It's hard to win.
It's hard to
the way
win.
it is.
And and some of those guys are. I mean, that's the thing at that level. There's good players, then there's like Hall of Fame players, and you have to play with Paul Kariya, which is one of those. Joe Thornton will be one of those. Kevin Sawyer, you remember that name from Spokane? I'm sure he told a story about Paul. 'Cause I played with Paul in Penticton as well, but I mean, as in junior A. So he was 1 or 2 years older than me, and he was lighting that league up. And he was super nice guy. And still, if I see him in an airport now, like we'll sit and have a drink or whatever. And but he operated differently than everyone else. Like he did. There was just something about him that was a little bit different. And then Kevin told a story about how Kevin was just like, he'd be there for like 2 months and then get sent down, and like Paul as a captain never ever talked to him. And finally he says one day he like slashed him in the shin pads during practice. He said, "Hey Paul, Kevin Sawyer, nice to meet you." And he said it was perfect because like Paul actually kind of woke up and then was like really kind of inclusive with him and nice, but it was just like he was just so focused kind of like on his thing, right? That he just wasn't that Pat LaFontaine mentality. But it sounds like he was a little bit different when you played with him, right?
Yeah, he loosened up a little bit. I think Teemu Solani loosened him up, and then just changed the scenery coming to Nashville. We had some characters too, like with Hartsey and Vern Fiddler, myself, and Chemo. Like we had a really good team, and just it was Nashville. Like it was just he could go about his business, and yeah, lots of fun stories about PK for sure.
Oh, that's cool. Well, let's move on. So since we're on Nashville there, and we're getting, I told you this was going to happen with time. Like we're almost here in 90 minutes. We haven't even talked about player development yet. But like, what an interesting role. And I mean, it coincides with a little bit with what I'm doing now with helping young guys get better. I mean, I just love that aspect. I just think that's such an interesting thing to be a part of. And you're doing it at the NHL level with these prospects. How did you get into doing that, first of all, and what was the draw?
I think I got into it just because I love it. I love the game. Like I played a long time just because I love coming to the rink, love hanging out with the boys. I don't, did I want to get into coaching? Did I want to drag my family back through traveling and, never seeing them, especially as a coach. You're up at 5 in the morning, you're at the rink by 6, you're home after games, so you never see your kids. So I thought player development would be a perfect segue, kind of, you're in it, you're not in it. You're, like I said earlier, I basically signed 2-year deals to develop the next young guy to take my spot. And that's you can still walk the walk and talk the talk with the guys and not be totally in it. I moved back to Rochester, the family, coached the boys in hockey, and I would just travel and see our prospects all over, US, Canada. I went to Europe a few times to see our prospects and just have relationships with them. Just, I think just recapping my career of major injuries, tough times getting into the lineup, making it to the NHL when I'm 25 years old, playing almost 700 games, playing 400 games in the minors. Like, I think I have a good wealth of knowledge of experience that I can just, tell my story and relate to these young guys. So I really enjoyed this. Probably my might be my 6th year as player development for Nashville. I ran it, did it myself for the first probably 4 years. It was a lot, seeing all our guys. And then I finally started getting some help and hiring some development guys who are defensemen, and just because it's just evolving. Guys need a little bit more, just somebody to talk to.
Sure. How did that, so you started as the head guy, that was your first role in it, as being the head guy. How does that interview go, and I mean, is that something you come in and you're telling them how you see this being, or do you just do they tell you how it's going to be and you're going to be the foot soldier running it, or how did that whole conversation start?
So I told you Brent Peterson called me he kind of planted the seed with me halfway through my last year in St. Louis. My last year in St. Louis, we had that lockout till Christmas, and then we started playing. And I knew that was going to be my last year. Like I said, I was 37, 38 years old, 4th line center. And at the end of the year, I took a puck in the face. So I got my face operated on, and I had a sport hernia. And David Poyle called me, and he's like, "Scotty's David Poyle here. Are you ever going to retire?" I'm like, I don't know, David, what do you got for me? He's like, "Well, I'd like you to maybe do player development for us. Marty Jelena was with us before, and then he went to Calgary to be assistant coach. So we haven't had anybody in player development role for a year. Would you like to do it?" I'm like, "All right, well, let me talk to the family and see what it's all about, and see if I want to maybe play another year." So I called Marty Jelena, and Marty explained it to me and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, I'm through 2 surgeries. David's called me, and the way David is, so he wanted me there yesterday to do all the meetings and do all this stuff. And I'm like, "David, I just had 2 surgeries. I don't even think I'm allowed on the plane." So anyhow, I go back, we agree on it. I come to Nashville a couple weeks later, and just kind of put
Right.
put
So
my little stamp on it, I guess. So
right. So it wasn't like you really it wasn't like put out, and it wasn't like all these resumes coming in. It was like an ask, and if you said yes, you could do it, essentially. So it wasn't a competition. Yeah, I know. Well, that's a great spot to be in. So for everyone listening, what does first of all, what is your official title, and what role what do you do for a job description, if you were to put it in a nutshell?
So I'm the general manager of our minor league team, so Milwaukee Admirals. So I do that, and then I'm the director of player development. I have Rob Scuderi that helps me on the defensive side of things. I have Sebastian Bordalo that helps me with the forwards. So basically, once we draft the player, he's ours. Like, he comes into our little nest. So we probably have, I don't know, maybe, 16 prospects right now that are first-year college guys, third-year college guys, couple going back to senior year. We have 2 kids in the OHL. We have a couple kids over in Europe, one in Sweden, one in Finland. So those are our guys. So we watch video on them. We send them video. We send them tapes. We talk to them. We kind of just mold them a little bit on their game, just like a little bit of the pro details. Nothing about systematic stuff, because we don't know what their coaches are teaching them. We're just mostly just trying to get the fine details and just have a relationship with them.
And so these guys are, Scotty, guys then that have been drafted but aren't in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Right. They're not pro. They're not in the East Coast League, and they're not in the AHL. They're draft picks that are still amateurs.
Still amateurs playing for Boston University, North Dakota, these guys. So we fly in there and see them on the weekends, talk to their coaches. If their coaches need some help with them, like sometimes another voice is good. So they'll call us and say, "Hey, this kid's struggling. Do you think you can give him a call?" And we, sure. So we'll go down after games, talk to the coaches, and just have a relationship with the organization as well. And then every year you have a pool of prospects, and you can't sign everybody. You're only allowed 50 NHL contracts. So that's between Milwaukee, Nashville, your prospects. So out of your 7 drafted players every single year, hopefully you can sign them all, because that means you're doing a great job drafting. But usually you probably sign maybe 3 or 4 out of that 7, maybe 3 out of that draft class. So you really have to make sure you're picking the right kids, because you're signing them to a 3-year contract. You can't get out of it. So you're you have to develop them. So some of them, you know, they get drafted, they play college, and some play junior, but maybe that's their ceiling, you know, and that's just there's nothing wrong with it. To get to that spot is unbelievable, and some just have a little bit more potential to keep growing. So, and then that's our job as an organization, is to pick those guys out of who we think has the biggest upside and sign them to a contract. Then most of them come to me in Milwaukee, and I like my job is because I can see exactly where they fit in from college, junior, Europe, into my team in Milwaukee, and then eventually on to Nashville. There's a few exceptions, like Dante Fabro for Boston University last year. He skipped me, and I've known these kids for 5 years, and so he just went right to Nashville. He's a great player, and so that's where he belongs.
So you talked about the ceiling there, right? Some guys have a ceiling, and some guys are able to maybe push through or develop a little bit more. Is there any type of a personality trait or something, some intangible that you see with guys that can tell you who are the guys that got a little more, or why are certain guys have a little more and others don't? Is there anything there in your years that you've seen?
Well, I think everyone's different. Like even the style to play and just how some guys aren't great college players, and some guys are better pros than they are in college. Like just their demeanor, like some things, if you're wound up and you're ready to go and go through a wall every single game, that's great. But sometimes that doesn't translate at the pro level. Sometimes because you get too jammed up. I'm still relatively really new at this. Like it's great because it surprises me every year. There's a perfect example is Tommy Novak. He was our second round draft pick, Minnesota, played at Minnesota for 4 years and really highly touted, struggled his last year, senior year. He might've scored 2 or 3 goals, and second round pick. So because of our relationship that we had, we said, Tommy, like, I know you, we'll go to bat for you. So he signed an American League contract, just a bare bones American League contract last year for us to keep him in our group. Because once you draft a player, he's in your nest. Like you're never going to put more into a player who's your draft pick than a guy you just trade for. Like you have vested interest in these kids. Yeah. So I'm like, just sign an American League deal, you know, and see how it goes. So he ends up signing an American League contract, and he's 7th in scoring in the American Hockey League last year. So we flipped his American League contract, signed him to a 2-year entry-level NHL contract with $90,000 signing bonus, $70,000 in the American League, plus your $700 in the NHL. So he basically got his contract, but he had to kind of take a step back before he gets to take a step forward. Not too many kids would do that. They'd be like, forget it, I want an NHL contract with this team. But like I said, we have a vested interest in these kids. So it's a really good example to show other kids coming. And he was a better pro than he was a better college player.
Right. And he has a chance next year to make the team?
He has a chance he's still got a little bit of work to do, just on the little face-offs, all that. But he's like a Mike Ribeiro type of player. Sees the ice, makes plays. You know, he's another skill set that we need in our organization. You can't have all Scott Nichols just going 100 miles an hour and don't know where the puck is. Like you need pieces.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, what do you find as the biggest strengths and maybe the biggest holes in today's player? Like what's different? I don't even need to compare it between our era and theirs, because it doesn't really matter. Like if you were to pick out something that the majority of players need to work on right now, what would it be?
It's probably more consistency now than ever, because kids are making the NHL earlier. You know, we never, like, the NHL isn't a development league, and the NHL is starting to turn into a development league. Like there's more patience for the young guys coming in, and that's just your salary cap era. You need the young guys to play. You need them to produce. So I'd probably just more consistency. I think all the kids now, like you play World Juniors, all that kind of stuff. Like these kids are on a huge stage right from age 14, 15. So I find you see these young kids coming in and stepping into the playoffs. You're like, who are these guys? And then nothing really rattles them because they've been taught early to handle it, but it's still like, I think just overall the grind of this regular season it's just the consistency. It's just little details, and it's hard. You're 19, 20 years old playing in the National Hockey League against the best players in the world.
Sure. No, that's a great point. And consistency is such an interesting thing too, because it was something that I was told as let's say a 21-year-old pro, right? Like, doing well in the minors, and then somebody would tell me, if anyone did talk to me, was, we got to be more consistent.
Yeah.
And I just never really understood what that meant. I mean, I kind of did, like, in the sense of, well, actually, I kind of didn't. Like, I assumed they were talking about maybe work ethic in games. Like, there's no way you're going to score every game. So, man, I'm not sure how that you can be more consistent with that, right? Like, if you're producing. But like, if you were to say to somebody now, more consistent, what is the underlying action to help them become more consistent that you would be working on them with?
Well, I think it's just like, if you look at your top players, like your Crosbys, everybody, your top players are all killing penalties now. They're all playing 200-foot game. They're all blocking shots. Where before it was just like, okay, your fourth line guys are killing penalties. Now your best players are playing in every situation. So to be consistent, it's on your wall play. It's in your own zone. It's reloading back to the middle. It's not just scoring goals. It's just your all-around 200-foot game, because there's no time or space, and everybody is so detailed because of video and coaching and skill set, like, and there's no hooking and holding. So you better be in good position, good,
right.
Your foundation is better being good. So your consistency isn't just like, okay, if you get a chance to score. It's just like the days you feel like this and you could skate forever, and you probably have more days that you don't feel very good. You just gotta make those little you're not hitting home runs. You don't need a backhand sauce a puck through the middle of the ice. Just make the play if you're not feeling it that night. That's kind of just, and whatever role you get put into, and just maybe you're not getting power play time. Maybe you're, just establish yourself as soon as you can, and just on the little details of playing hockey.
Right. Would there be any tips or tricks off the ice to increase consistency on the ice? I know a lot of the guys, and I mean, you went there too, which is fine, that we always think about what's going on the ice during the game, right? Like, this is when you need to do this. And sometimes we forget about what actually is happening away from the rink, whether that is when you show up for practice, or what you're thinking about before you go to bed at night, or whatever it is. Like, do you think that is some things that guys could work on to help their consistency?
Yeah, I think everything. I think that's where your nutrition comes in, your sleep patterns come in. Like, now we all have sleep doctors, where before, after every game, we'd fly out right after, and a lot of teams are staying overnight because they have a better sleep in that home city, and then they get up and they fly. So even all those little stains, video games are great, but not playing until 2 or 3 in the morning. As young guys coming into the league, like, you got to get your rest. Like, all this stuff comes into play, and it's not like we have mental coaches. Like, we have so many resources for the kids to reach out and use them, because everybody, just that little detail, that little fine minute that might put you over the hump to keep you in the NHL, or stay in the NHL, or have a career in the NHL.
Right.
It could help.
Yeah, with those habits. I mean, I've heard a lot of guys talk about it. I mean, that's one thing that I learned as I went through, was like the habits of being a pro. Because you might have the toolkit to be a pro, right? You might have the ability and can skate and you can do all these things, but you haven't quite understood what it means to be a professional, and how to bring that every day, and how to show up at the rink, enthusiastic and not with bedhead, and, make the most of your time there. And I think that there is quite a bit of stuff that guys do need to learn coming in. To help establish themselves and help with their consistency, at the end of the day, how to produce.
It's just experience. It's just, you can tell these kids till they're blue in the face of what's going to happen, this and that, but it's just, until they actually live it, until they actually play a game in the NHL and say, oh yeah, like the pace of it, the execution, the crispness of handling pucks on your backhand, like, you can tell them that. They have to go through it.
Right.
And once they go through it and they realize it, you're like, all right, that's training camp. Okay, my body fat better be under 10. Like everybody else is. It's just, and that's why we have development camp, And we go through all these. So when these kids go from junior to college and they finally get to their first year training camp, and it's a big step. The trainers are, the trainers, the coaching staff, all the development guys, the minor league guys. So now they're comfortable going from 4 years development camp. Now it's training camp's not so hard. They're not getting in at 2 a.m, getting up at 6 and, putting a name tag on your shirt because nobody knows who you are. Everyone's, so you make it a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable for the guys coming in now.
When you're working, and I mean, I didn't realize that you were doing the GM role there too. That's a lot, man. Like that's to do that and player development. 'Cause I mean, there's a lot of back office stuff running a team there in the minor leagues. How do you establish the relationships, one with the guys so they trust you, because they do need to, I would assume that's a big part of what you're doing, but yet there's only so many spots where they're going, how do you manage that, first of all? And then who is your first, the second part of that is, who's your contact point? Is it the GM then, the NHL GM, as far as who you think should be going? And I assume you're asked that question, who's ready?
Yeah, so that's so our GM here is David Poyle, and we have a really good group. Jeff Kelty is our assistant GM. Brian Poyle, his son, is our assistant GM as well. He does a lot of the negotiation, the cap stuff, and then myself. So that's our management team. So that we lean on each other quite a bit that way. And I take care of all my staff, all my coaches in Milwaukee. I'm in Milwaukee probably 2 weeks of the month. And then I go from Milwaukee to see some of our prospects. And then I also coach my boys in hockey. So I'm kind of all over the place, but and I also go on the ice. I probably only one of the only GMs at the American League level that go on the ice. I go on the ice with our guys because I'm still player development, and our head coach is fantastic because who wants their boss on the ice with them? But we have a good relationship, and I think just my personality wise, but I spent my whole life sitting on the bench and at ice level, and that's how I react and relate with our guys. So even just skating around the ice, the Indy 500, 5 minutes before practice, how many guys will come up to me, or I go up to them and put your arm around them and say, hey, great game, you played great last night. Or I can be brutally honest with them and say, let's get going here. And they're like, yeah, I know I wasn't that good. It's just your barriers are off. Like, I'm not sitting in the stands with my suit on. I am on the ice level, dropping pucks. They're hitting my shins with their sticks. So I think I relate very well. And I think our guys do well and play hard and want to play till the middle of June because of that, because of the culture that we brought there.
That's awesome. No, I love that. I mean, that's great because I mean, like I said earlier, it always used to be like an us versus them. When you have somebody in the trench there talking with you and wanting to know what's going on and being relatable, right? It feels like you're pulling the same rope, and I'm sure you're able to get a lot more out of guys doing that. So
speaking of that, and it's just, so I said, if I am in the position where I'm at, I'm going to have a father's trip. So I put a father's trip in 2 years, in the last 2 years in the American Hockey League. It's a little bit of a hillbilly father's trip. It's not like we're flying and staying in the Ritz-Carlton. So, and since then, our record, I don't even know, we might have lost 12 games in the last year and a half after the father's trip. We went on a 12-game winning streak. As soon as we had the father's trip, went on a 12-game winning streak year before and ended up second in our division, got into the playoffs. So we fly him in on a Thursday morning. We have a dinner Thursday night, nice dinner, hand out jerseys to the kids, come up, say something nice about their dads. Just dads and sons. And there's never a lot of huggy, feely. Is the best. Kids tearing up, dads tearing up. It's the minors. It's the federal league basically. So we have that, so we have dinner, and then they're welcomed in our meetings. So they come to the rink the next morning. We have breakfast for them. They go through power play, penalty kill. Coach's office is open to training. Like, dads are around everywhere. And we play Friday, usually get on a bus Saturday morning or Friday night, or usually Saturday morning, go to Rockford or Chicago. So the dads see 2 games, and they usually go out with the boys that Saturday after the game, and they fly home, see mom. So it's been great. I loved it. And the boys enjoy it so much, and I enjoyed talking to the dads. and telling stories. And like we have Jared Tenorti, his dad, Mark Tenorti, played in the NHL for a long time with Washington. We have Rem Pitlick is Lance Pitlick. He played in Ottawa for a long time. So we have a couple NHL guys, kids play on my team, and just them come up as a, hey, thanks. This is the best. I never had the opportunity to do this with my dad. Thank you for putting it together. So
yeah,
it's great.
Super special, and a great way to build that culture and that community, right? Anytime you can do that in a pro sport, people don't get that, right? They assume that everyone gets together and it's rah rah, right? Like you have to do things consciously to get guys to believe in each other and want to do things for the guy beside them, right? And it's not as natural as many things. So those little things that you're doing there are huge. Then you get loyalty, like you earn loyalty too, which is a great thing, right? They want to go to bat. No, that's amazing, man. I've had a few conversations with guys. I love what's happening with the game. Boy, it'd be fun to be a young guy now coming up. There's so much more support. There's so much more resources there. And like you said, they're a necessary part of the team. Like you need those guys. You have to have those guys if you're going to be a winner. So they're in a scenario where if you truly can be successful, you can be successful, right? If you have the want and the desire, if you want to show, guys are going to go to bat for you. So cool, man. We're almost hitting the 2-hour mark, so I got to let you go. We could probably do this for the rest of the day, but I know your story is second to none. I've been wanting to talk to you since you were actually done your career, but just the way it goes and families and stuff. And it's taken 20 years to talk. But from me to you, congratulations on an amazing career. Like super, super cool. Like I said, at the time I would never have guessed it, right? That the next year you'd have been in Calgary and to never be seen again and to have this amazing pro career. And now you're doing it at the NHL level with player development. So good for you. I really appreciate your time today, Scott. And a lot of guys learned a lot here. I mean, like there's a lot of ways to get there, right? It's not just one way. Yeah. I like your scenario of having a plan A, no plan B.
Yeah.
Right? You go all in.
It's probably not the smartest, but it worked. So.
But anyways, we'll keep in touch for sure. And again, thanks so much for hanging out today. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Pods. It was great. I enjoyed it too. Anytime.
Awesome, man. Cheers.
Well, that was amazing. Scott is such a fun guy to talk to. His stories are great. He was a pit bull, definitely to play against. He was a pit bull out there. He would scrap and claw. He would be chirping. He would be yelling. He'd be doing whatever it took to help his team win. And that got him noticed. And that got him his 700 games after being a minor leaguer for 7 years. And to do what he's doing now and to be as successful as he's being, it just lets you know that when you care about something and when you're passionate about something and when you're a good person while doing it, there's a spot for you. So for everyone out there, everyone has their own path. Everyone makes it on their own time and in their own way. And I love stories like Scott is because we can all learn from what Mr. Nichol did. From being the third last guy taken in 1993 to being an undersized guy at 5'9", 180 pounds, to being a guy that just kind of was getting overlooked, but he kept showing up. And he kept showing up, and he kept getting better, and he kept not making excuses. And guess what? The proof is in the pudding. So thanks so much for your time, Mr. Nichol. You are an awesome guy. I enjoyed playing with you in Detroit, and I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Till next time, thanks for listening to Up My Hockey.